Marcus Cole, marked to those few who got close enough, ran a final diagnostic check on the encrypted comms system. The green status lights blinked back reassuringly from the server rack humming quietly in the corner of his minimalist office. At 47, the lines etched around his eyes weren't just from squinting at schematics. They were remnants of Shamo suns, smoke-filled firefights, and the particular weariness that came from pulling broken bodies from wreckage, first as an Army Special Forces medic, then as a veteran firefighter. Now he ran Cole Security Solutions, a boutique firm in Austin specializing in risk assessment and discreet protection details for clients who valued competence over flash. The work was demanding, analytical, leveraging the discipline and hyper-awareness seared into him by his past lives. It paid the bills, kept his edge sharp, and mostly kept the ghosts at bay. His routine was his anchor. Up at 0500, workout, strong coffee, review overnight threat reports, then dive into client assessments. Predictability was a balm against the chaos he knew the world held just beneath its surface. His wife, Sophia, usually left earlier for her demanding job as vice president of marketing at Novatech, a rapidly expanding tech giant helmed by the charismatic media darling CEO, Julian Vance. Their daughter, Olivia, a bright 19-year-old sophomore studying graphic design at UT, was their shared pride, the steady light in their increasingly parallel orbits. Lately, Sophia had been distant, buried in work, attributing her long hours and distracted replies to the pressure of Novatech's upcoming product launch. Marc, accustomed to compartmentalizing, had accepted her explanations, perhaps too readily. The shrill ring of his personal cell shattered the morning's focused quiet. An unknown number. He almost let it go to voicemail, assuming another sales pitch, but some ingrained instinct made him answer. "Cole! Mr. Cole?" A woman's voice, professional but tinged with urgency. "This is St. David's Medical Center. Your daughter, Olivia Cole, was brought into our emergency department." Mark's hand tightened on the phone, his knuckles white. The background hum of the servers seemed to fade. "What happened? Is she okay?" "Sir, we can't give details over the phone, but she's conscious. The doctor needs to speak with you. You should come down immediately." "On my way." His voice was level, betraying none of the sudden, icy dread gripping his chest. He shut down his workstation with practiced efficiency, grabbed his keys and wallet, his mind already cycling through potential scenarios, car accident, campus incident, sudden illness. Nothing prepared him for the reality. The controlled chaos of the ER was a familiar environment, yet seeing it from this side felt alien, terrifying. A nurse glanced at his ID and directed him toward Trauma Bay 3. Pushing through the curtain, Marc felt the world tilt. Olivia lay on the gurney, her face pale beneath the harsh fluorescent lights, a stark contrast to the angry purple blooming around her left eye and the split lip someone had crudely bandaged. Her arm was in a temporary sling, and she clutched her side, tears silently tracking paths through the grime on her cheeks. "Liv?" His voice was barely a whisper. He was at her side in 2 strides, his medic training kicking in as he scanned her visible injuries, his firefighter instincts assessing the damage, his father's heart shattering into a million pieces. "Dad." Her voice broke on a sob, raw with pain and fear. She reached for him with her good hand, her fingers trembling. "I'm here, baby girl. I'm right here." He took her hand, his touch gentle, his mind racing. "What happened?" "Who did this?" Olivia squeezed her eyes shut, fresh tears escaping. I went home early. My morning class got canceled." She took a shaky breath. "The house was quiet, but I heard noises upstairs. In your bedroom, Dad." Mark's blood ran cold. He kept his face impassive, his voice steady. "Go on, Liv." "Mom was there." Olivia's voice dropped, laced with shame and disbelief. "With Mr. Vance. Julian Vance." The name hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. Sophia and her boss, the charismatic CEO, the late nights, the endless meetings. It all clicked into place with sickening clarity. I yelled," Olivia stammered, her body starting to shake. He looked shocked. Then these 2 guys, big guys in suits, came out of the master bathroom. Mr. Vance just nodded at them. Her breath hitched. "They grabbed me, told me to shut up. I struggled, and one of them, he hit me. Then they dragged me downstairs and threw me out the front door onto the porch." She was openly sobbing now, clutching his hand like a lifeline. "They locked the door. I just ran. Someone down the street saw me, called 911. A glacial calm settled over Marc. the kind that preceded the storm, the kind he recognized from firefights where his survival depended on absolute focus amidst chaos. His wife, her boss, his daughter, assaulted by hired muscle because she stumbled upon their tryst. The betrayal was staggering, multi-layered, but the image burning behind his eyes was Olivia's bruised face, the terror in her voice. They had crossed a line from which there was no return. "Have the doctors seen you properly?" he asked, his voice low, controlled. "Yeah, they did x-rays. Said maybe a broken rib, wrist sprain, probably a concussion." "Okay." He gently brushed a stray strand of hair from her forehead. "Listen to me, Olivia. None of this is your fault. Do you understand? None of it." He needed her to know that, and needed it to be the first thing she held on to. "Did you tell the doctors exactly what happened? Who assaulted you?" She nodded numbly. "They called the police, too. An officer took my statement." "Good." He spotted a police officer conferring with a nurse near the station. Detective Harding, a name he recognized, a solid cop he'd liaised with on a previous corporate security case. He needed to establish the narrative, control the information to flow from the start. He squeezed Olivia's hand. "I need to talk to the police and the doctors. Get everything documented. You rest. I won't be far." "Dad," Olivia whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "Mr. Vance, he's really powerful. Those guys—" "Don't you worry about Julian Vance," Marc said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion, but carrying an undercurrent that made Olivia shiver. "Don't worry about anyone but getting better." He kissed her forehead, then turned and walked toward the nurse's station, his stride measured, his face a mask of calm professionalism. He approached Detective Harding, introduced himself, and requested copies of Olivia's statement and the initial police report. He then located the attending physician, meticulously questioning him about Olivia's injuries, treatment plan, and prognosis, ensuring every bruise, every potential fracture was being documented with clinical precision. As he spoke with the doctor, his mind worked with chilling clarity. Sophia's betrayal was a deep wound, but survivable. Vance using his security to assault his daughter, that was an act of war. This wasn't just about infidelity or assault charges. This was about power, intimidation, and a callous disregard for consequence that Marc recognized from the darkest corners of his past experiences. Vance and Sophia thought they were untouchable. They thought they could injure his child and lock the door. They had no comprehension of the man they had just provoked. They didn't know that Marcus Cole, the quiet security consultant, still housed the lethal focus of a special forces medic and the unwavering resolve of a firefighter who ran towards the flames. They would learn. Marc spent the next 12 hours orchestrating Olivia's care, ensuring specialists reviewed her scans, arranging for follow-up appointments, and settling her into a temporary stay with a trusted family friend, far from the toxic residue of their home. Only when he knew she was physically safe, though emotionally scarred, did he allow himself to fully process the raw data of the situation. The medic in him triaged the wounds: infidelity, assault, conspiracy. The strategist began formulating a response. Direct confrontation now was tactically unsound, emotional rather than effective. He needed information, leverage. His first call was to Dave Chen. They'd served together in the same SF unit, Marc patching up bodies while Dave worked communication and signals intelligence magic. Now, Dave ran a thriving cybersecurity firm. "Dave, it's Marc. Need a deep dive off the books. Julian Vance, CEO of Novatech, and his vice president marketing, Sophia Cole." He kept his voice devoid of inflection, stating only facts, looking for financial irregularities, network vulnerabilities, comms intercepts, anything dirty, especially connections between the two of them. "Novatech? Heavy hitters." Dave's voice came back, instantly serious. "Personal or professional target?" "It just became deeply personal," Marc replied. "Olivia was assaulted by Vance's security." "Silence, then." "Understood. Give me 48 hours for a preliminary scan. I'll need secure credentials for anything deeper on the corporate side, but I can start with open source and dark web chatter, see what shakes loose regarding Vance." "Sophia. That's trickier if she's using personal devices, but I'll see what connections I can trace." "Whatever it takes, Dave. Need to know what I'm walking into." His second meeting was with Detective Harding. They met in a nondescript coffee shop miles from downtown. Harding, a weary but sharp detective in his late 40s, listened patiently as Marc laid out Olivia's official statement regarding the assault, omitting the affair for now. Vance's guys, huh? Harding sighed, stirring his coffee. Executive protection detail. Ex-cops, ex-military mostly. They lawyer up fast. Vance himself. He tapped a pen on the table. Smooth operator, lots of money, lots of connections. We've heard whispers about him before. Aggressive takeovers, complaints that disappear. But nothing's ever stuck. He keeps his hands clean, legally speaking. These guys assaulted my daughter, Marc stated, his voice dangerously quiet. I know. And we'll pursue the assault charges based on Olivia's statement, Harding assured him. We'll interview them, pull security footage from the street if there is any. But be prepared for Vance to stonewall, claim Olivia was trespassing or hysterical, paint his guys as protecting his home. His legal team is top tier. Harding leaned forward slightly. Look, Marc, off the record, guys like Vance operate in the gray areas. If you're looking for leverage beyond the assault charge itself, you'll need more than just Olivia's word against his security team. You'll need something concrete he can't spin his way out of. Check public records, lawsuits, corporate filings, property records. Sometimes the dirt isn't buried as deep as they think. He paused. And whatever you find, whatever you plan, stay on the right side of the law yourself. Don't give them an excuse to turn the tables. Marc nodded, absorbing the implicit warning and the subtle guidance. Harding was confirming his suspicions. Vance was protected, and a simple assault case might get buried. He needed to dismantle Vance's entire structure. He decided a controlled confrontation was necessary, not for catharsis, but for a reconnaissance. He needed to gauge their reactions, see how they played their hand. He texted Sophia, requesting an urgent meeting, suggesting Julian be present to discuss the incident involving Olivia and his security personnel. They agreed, perhaps surprisingly quickly, to meet at Novatech headquarters the next afternoon, Julian's turf, where he felt most powerful. Walking into the opulent Novatech lobby felt like entering the heart of the beast. Glass walls soared, minimalist furniture gleamed, and employees moved with the hushed intensity of acolytes. Marc was escorted to Julian Vance's penthouse office, a space that screamed power and ego, with panoramic views of the Austin skyline. Julian Vance stood by the window, impeccably dressed, radiating confidence. He was handsome in a sharp, predatory way. Sophia stood near his desk, looking pale and drawn, but composed, dressed in her usual corporate armor. Marc, Julian began, extending a hand Marc ignored. Terrible business about Olivia. My security chief informs me there was an unfortunate misunderstanding when she entered your home unexpectedly. Apparently she became quite agitated. Agitated? Marc repeated, keeping his voice level. My daughter was physically assaulted by your employees, Julian, in my home, after finding my wife in a compromising position with you. Sophia flinched but didn't speak. Julian's smile didn't reach his eyes. Now, let's not over-dramatize. Sophia and I were having a late-night work session. Olivia startled everyone. My team is trained for discretion and neutralizing potential threats. Perhaps their response was firm, but necessary given the circumstances. Neutralizing threats? Marc stepped closer, his presence filling the space despite his deliberate calm. My daughter isn't a threat. She's a victim, and your team acted like thugs. I assure you Novatech Security operates with the utmost professionalism, Julian countered smoothly. If Olivia feels she was mistreated, I'm prepared to offer you gesture. Cover her medical bills, perhaps a small settlement for her distress, provided this unfortunate incident remains private. We wouldn't want any unwarranted negative attention for anyone involved, especially Sophia. The veiled threat hung in the air. Sophia finally spoke, her voice tight. Marc, it was a misunderstanding. Julian's right. Olivia shouldn't have reacted that way. We were just talking. The ease with which she lied, the way she parroted Julian's narrative, struck Marc harder than any physical blow. Were you just talking? Marc asked, his gaze shifting to Sophia, holding hers until she looked away. When you transferred $50,000 from our joint savings account to an offshore holding company 2 weeks ago? Sophia's head snapped up, color draining from her face. Julian's mask flickered, surprise warring with calculation in his eyes. Marc hadn't known about the transfer until Dave Chen's initial scan pinged it just hours before this meeting. A significant withdrawal Sophia had claimed was for estimated taxes. That was for... Sophia stammered, floundering. Don't bother. Marc cut her off. I know you weren't paying taxes. He turned back to Julian. This meeting is over. Understand this. The assault on my daughter will be addressed through official channels. As for everything else... He let the sentence hang, his eyes promising consequences without specifying them. He turned and walked out, leaving them in stunned silence. The meeting confirmed it. They were working together. They felt untouchable, and they were lying. Poorly. Sophia's financial move hinted at the deeper conspiracy Harding had warned about. 2 days later, Dave Chen delivered the payload. Encrypted files detailed a systematic pattern of Julian Vance using shell corporations, layered transactions, and inflated invoices to siphon funds from Novatech, likely millions over several years. And woven through the digital tapestry was Sophia's involvement. Emails between her and Julian discussed setting up specific accounts. File metadata showed she'd altered financial reports before board meetings, deleted chat logs partially recovered by Dave, hinted at a plan not just to embezzle, but to eventually leave together, using the stolen funds and potentially framing a scapegoat. One fragment read, once the Series C funding closes and initiate MC firewall protocol, plausible deniability vital. MC Marcus Cole, firewall protocol, they were planning to burn him. Dave had also found evidence of Julian using corporate fixers to squash a previous sexual harassment claim and to pressure a co-founder out of the company during an earlier funding round. The man was ruthless, methodical, and careless enough to leave digital breadcrumbs. He's smart, Marc, but arrogant, Dave concluded over a secure line. Thinks he's covered all of his tracks. Sophia, she seems fully complicit. Looks like she handled a lot of the financial maneuvering, probably thought her access gave her protection. Marc stared at the evidence displayed on his monitor, the cold, hard proof of their calculated betrayal. The conspiracy wasn't just about covering up an affair or an assault. It was a deliberate plot to destroy him financially and personally. The soldier in him took over. Objective identified. Threat assessment complete. Time to plan the counter-offensive. Julian Vance and Sophia Cole had mistaken his discipline for passivity. They were about to learn the difference. The raw data Dave Chen had unearthed painted a picture not just of betrayal, but of calculated systemic corruption orchestrated by Julian Vance, with Sophia as a willing and crucial accomplice. Marc spent the next 72 hours immersed in the information, cross-referencing file names, tracing transaction paths, analyzing communication patterns. The Special Forces medic's instinct for identifying critical systems and vulnerabilities merged with the security consultant's analytical mind. Julian Vance, despite his power and connections, had weaknesses. His primary vulnerability was Novatech itself. The company was his power base, his source of wealth, and the engine for his ego. Its board, while currently swayed by his charisma and the company's inflated growth metrics, included members Dave had flagged as potentially ambitious or skeptical, particularly Elizabeth Sterling, a respected venture capitalist who represented a major investment firm. Julian's aggressive expansion and opaque financial dealings likely made some investors nervous, even if they hadn't voiced it openly yet. Regulatory bodies like the SEC were another pressure point. The evidence of financial irregularities, if presented correctly, could trigger investigations Julian couldn't easily quash. Sophia, blinded by her affair and ambition, was perhaps the weakest link emotionally, but her direct involvement in the financial manipulations made her legally exposed. Her panic during their office confrontation revealed she lacked Julian's icy composure under pressure. Marc's strategy formed, not a direct assault, but a multi-pronged offensive designed to destabilize Julian's power base, expose his crimes, and isolate both him and Sophia, using their own actions and arrogance against them. Phase 1 involved weaponizing the information Dave had gathered. Marc, using his expertise in secure communication and anonymization techniques learned long ago, began carefully curating packages of evidence. He sent encrypted files detailing specific financial discrepancies, anonymized but verifiable, to a notoriously tenacious investigative journalist at the Wall Street Journal, known for breaking tech scandals. He submitted a detailed whistleblower report, again anonymously, to the SEC's online portal, focusing on the suspected embezzlement and falsified reporting linked to the recent Series C funding round. Simultaneously, he tasked Dave with a more delicate operation. I need you to find concrete proof linking Julian to a specific regulatory official or board member he might have compromised, Marc instructed over an encrypted channel. Look for unusual communication patterns, hidden financial ties, anything that suggests undue influence, and see if you can find priors on his security team, specifically the two who assaulted Olivia. Any history of excessive force complaints, settlements? While Dave worked the digital angles, Marc focused on the human element. He meticulously researched the Novatech co-founder Julian had forced out years ago, a brilliant engineer named Alistair Finch. Finch had faded from the tech scene after signing a restrictive NDA, but Marc tracked him down to a quiet life in Oregon. Using a burner phone and a carefully crafted pretext, claiming to be researching unethical practices in tech startups for a security journal, Marc reached out. Finch was initially hesitant, wary after his experience, but Marc didn't push. He listened. He subtly shared anonymized tidbits mirroring Finch's own experience with Julian's ruthlessness, establishing credibility. Slowly, Finch began to talk, confirming Julian's pattern of manipulation, idea theft, and using legal intimidation to silence opponents. While the NDA prevented Finch from providing direct evidence against Julian, he offered invaluable insights into Julian's methods and ego. Crucially, he mentioned a former Novatech CFO, Robert Aiken, who had resigned abruptly under questionable circumstances around the time Julian consolidated power. Aiken might know where the financial bodies were buried. Finding Robert Aiken took more effort, but Marc eventually located him working a quiet accounting job in Colorado. This time, Marc was more direct, referencing the SEEIC investigation. He knew was likely brewing thanks to his anonymous tip. He presented Aiken with redacted evidence of the current financial irregularities, suggesting Aiken might inadvertently be implicated if he stayed silent. It was a calculated gamble, playing on Aiken's potential fear and desire for self-preservation. After a tense silence, Aiken agreed to speak, off the record for now, confirming Julian's methods of hiding losses, inflating revenues, and pressuring him to sign off on questionable reports, the very actions that led to his resignation. Aiken became another potential asset, a source waiting for the right moment to corroborate the digital evidence. Marc also initiated subtle pressure on Sophia. He used his knowledge of her routines and digital habits, gleaned from shared calendars and Dave's intel, to engineer accidental discoveries by her colleagues. An email accidentally forwarded showing her approving an unusually large, vaguely justified marketing expense linked to a shell company Dave identified. A misplaced document draft done on a shared drive hinting at inflated user engagement metrics she was responsible for reporting. Small things designed not to expose the whole plot yet, but to raise quiet questions about her judgment and competence among her peers and superiors, slowly eroding her internal support network. Meanwhile, Dave struck gold. He unearthed encrypted communications between Julian Vance and a key member of Novatech's audit committee, Arthur Pennington. The messages, combined with obscure financial transfers Dave traced, strongly suggested Pennington was feeding Julian inside information and helping him navigate regulatory scrutiny in exchange for lucrative off-the-books consulting fees. Dave also found 2 prior excessive force complaints against one of Olivia's assailants, Mark Jenkins, settled quietly by Novatech's previous security contractor before Julian brought security in-house under his direct control. Pennington is the linchpin for his financial cover, Dave reported, and Jenkins has a documented history. This gives you leverage on multiple fronts. Marc now held several key pieces: verifiable financial data sent into the SEC and the press, potential corroborating testimony from a former CFO, insights from a wrong co-founder, evidence of a compromised audit committee member, and a documented history of violence for one of Olivia's attackers. He hadn't fired a shot, hadn't thrown a punch since that initial controlled fury in the hospital, but the battlefield was prepped, mines were laid. His targets, Julian and Sophia, continued their lives, oblivious to the invisible forces converging upon them, still believing their wealth and connections made them untouchable. Marc, operating from the shadows, knew better. The offensive had begun. All that remained was to choose the time and place for the main assault. The first tremor hit 2 weeks later, disguised as a meticulously researched expose in the Wall Street Journal. The article, citing anonymous sources and leaked internal documents, raised serious questions about Novatech's aggressive accounting practices, particularly surrounding its recent Series C funding round. It hinted at inflated user metrics and opaque third-party vendor payments, the exact vulnerabilities Marc had fed the journalist. While Julian Vance wasn't named as the direct architect of the potential fraud, the implication was clear. The company he led was under scrutiny. Novatech's stock dipped sharply in pre-market trading. Within hours, the SEC confirmed it had opened a formal inquiry into Novatech's financial reporting, citing a credible whistleblower report. Panic began to ripple through the tech blogs and investor forums. Julian issued a defiant statement expressing full confidence in Novatech's practices and promising complete cooperation, but the damage control felt reactive, thin. This was the signal Marc had been waiting for. Through secure, anonymous channels managed by Dave, he delivered curated packages of information. Elizabeth Sterling, the skeptical board member, received irrefutable proof of Arthur Pennington's compromised position on the audit committee, the encrypted communications and financial trails Dave had uncovered. Simultaneously, Robert Aiken, the former CFO, received confirmation that the SEC investigation was indeed active and focused on the periods during which he felt pressured by Julian, subtly encouraging him that now was the time to come forward officially. The emergency board meeting convened the following day was reportedly explosive. Sterling, armed with Dave's evidence, confronted Pennington, who crumbled under pressure, admitting his conflict of interest. With Pennington neutralized and the SEC inquiry looming, the board's confidence in Julian shattered. They voted to place him on administrative leave pending the outcome of an independent internal investigation, a corporate death sentence. News of his suspension hit the wires immediately, sending Novatech's stock into freefall. Julian, stripped of his CEO title and access to corporate resources, scrambled. He likely tried to lean on his network, his fixers, his shady investors. But Marc had anticipated this. Dave had subtly seeded warnings through back channels about Julian becoming toxic, a target of federal investigation, making association with him risky. His usual allies melted away, unwilling to be dragged down with him. Sophia's downfall was swift and brutal. The internal investigation, now led by an outside counsel appointed by the board, quickly uncovered the digital trail Dave had meticulously mapped, the altered reports bearing her digital signature, the emails coordinating illicit fund transfers with Julian, the offshore account Marc had first discovered. Her accidental professional missteps, seeded earlier by Marc, now looked like part of a pattern of deception. Presented with the evidence, she was terminated immediately for cause, escorted from the Novatech building by security, not Julian's personal detail, but the building's own guards. The assault charges against Marc Jenkins and his partner were pursued with renewed vigor by Detective Harding's department now that Julian's protective shield was gone. Jenkins' documented history of excessive force, leaked anonymously, again courtesy of Dave, to a local news outlet, put public pressure on the DA's office. Facing mounting evidence and lacking Julian's legal backing, Jenkins eventually took a plea deal, implicating his partner and acknowledging the assault on Olivia. A crucial piece of vindication for her. Julian and Sophia, suddenly isolated and exposed, tried reaching out to Marc. Voicemails filled with desperate pleas, accusations, even threats arrived on his burner phone. He listened to none of them, forwarding the numbers to his lawyer with instructions to handle all contact. His attorney issued cease and desist letters, making it clear Marc's only communication would be through legal channels regarding the divorce and potential civil claims related to Olivia's assault. There was no need for a final dramatic confrontation in a dark warehouse. Marc watched the endgame unfold from his office, monitoring news feeds and receiving quiet updates from Dave and Harding. He saw Julian hounded by reporters outside his mansion, his arrogant facade replaced by a hunted look. He read about Sophia hiring a cut-rate defense attorney, her high-flying corporate career in ashes. His victory wasn't loud or explosive. It was the quiet, inevitable result of precision and leverage. He hadn't needed to break laws or bloody his own hands extensively. He had simply analyzed the weaknesses in his enemies' systems, their greed, their arrogance, their corruption, and applied pressure until they collapsed under their own weight. He used information as his scalpel, dissecting their empire, exposing the rot within. He ensured Cole's security solutions remained insulated, its reputation enhanced by the quiet competence displayed during the Novatech chaos. Somehow, word got around about their predicted instability. Olivia, receiving therapy and focusing on her studies, was healing, buoyed by the knowledge that the men who hurt her were facing justice, and that her mother's betrayal hadn't gone unanswered. Marc felt a grim satisfaction, but not elation. It was the feeling after a difficult operation. The threat neutralized, the patient stabilized, but the scars remained. He had protected his daughter, dismantled those who sought to destroy them, and secured their future. The immediate battle was won. Now began the long process of rebuilding not just a life, but trust on foundations he knew, this time were solid. The implosion of Novatech and the downfall of Julian Vance became a cautionary tale whispered in Austin's tech circles. Facing overwhelming evidence from the SEC investigation and potential testimony from Robert Aiken and others Marc had indirectly empowered, Julian ultimately pleaded guilty to multiple counts of wire fraud and securities fraud, receiving a substantial prison sentence. His empire built on hype and deception was dismantled, its viable assets sold off to competitors. Sophia, whose cooperation likely earned her some leniency, received probation and community service for her role in the financial manipulations, but her career and reputation were irrevocably destroyed. She faded into obscurity, a ghost in the machine she helped create. In contrast, Cole's security solutions thrived. Marc never advertised his connection to the Novatech case, but the right people noticed. Clients sought out his firm not for flashy bodyguards, but for a meticulous risk assessment, crisis management, and the kind of strategic counterintelligence that could preempt threats before they materialized. His past, once a source of quiet haunting, became an asset, proof of his ability to navigate chaos and neutralize the complex threats with discipline and discretion. He expanded the company, hiring other veterans who shared his ethos, building a team renowned for its quiet competence. 5 years later, Marc stood with Olivia on the observation deck of Austin's Frostbank Tower, looking out at the city skyline. Olivia, now 24, had graduated with honors and landed a coveted position at a leading cybersecurity firm, Dave Chen's firm, in fact, working in their digital forensics unit. The trauma of her assault hadn't defined her. It had forged her. She channeled her experience into a drive to uncover hidden truths and hold bad actors accountable in the digital realm. The shadow in her eyes had faded, replaced by a keen intelligence and quiet confidence that made Marc immensely proud. "Dave says you're already outperforming half his senior analysts," Marc commented, a rare smile touching his lips. Olivia grinned. "He exaggerates, but it feels good, Dad. Like balancing the scales somehow." Their relationship, once strained by unspoken tensions and Sophia's manipulation, had been rebuilt on a foundation of stark honesty and shared resilience. They didn't dwell on the past, but they didn't ignore the lessons learned either. "Heard from Harding last week," Marc said casually. "Julian Vance was denied parole again. Apparently he still blames everyone but himself." "Some people never change," Olivia murmured, her gaze distant for a moment before returning to the present. Sophia sent another email, through the alumni network this time, still trying to explain. "Delete it? Instantly." They had established firm boundaries years ago. Sophia was part of a past they had survived, not one they needed to revisit. Marc occasionally received quiet updates. Sophia working low-level jobs, struggling financially, isolated. He felt no satisfaction, only distant confirmation that choices have consequences. His own life had found a new equilibrium. He still maintained rigorous discipline, but the ghosts were quieter now, replaced by the demands of his growing business and the quiet pride he took in Olivia's accomplishments. His friendship with Dave Chen had deepened into a solid partnership, their complementary skills creating a formidable security resource. His professional relationship with Detective Harding remained one of mutual respect, occasionally collaborating when corporate malfeasance crossed into criminal territory. Thinking of expanding the threat and intelligence division, Marc mused, more to himself than Olivia, and seeing increased chatter around corporate espionage and targeting biotech. "Makes sense," Olivia agreed. "Valuations through the roof. R&D's vulnerable." She understood his world now, spoke his language. Later that evening, reviewing security protocols on his encrypted laptop, Marc reflected on the path that had brought him here. The betrayal by Sophia and Julian had been a brutal breach, an invasion that threatened to destroy everything. His response had been equally brutal in its strategic precision. He hadn't sought vengeance in the heat of the moment, but justice, delivered cold and calculated. He had used his skills, honed in war and firefighting, to protect his own, dismantle the threat, and build something stronger from the wreckage. He ran Cole Security Solutions like a garrison, vigilant, prepared, fortified against external threats, built on loyalty and competence. He knew the world remained a dangerous place, that betrayals could come from unexpected quarters, but he was no longer the unsuspecting husband, the man blindsided by lies hidden beneath a familiar surface. He understood the terrain now. He controlled the high ground. A notification pinged, a routine security alert from Dave's system monitoring dark web forums. No immediate threat, just situational awareness. Marc acknowledged it, his focus unwavering. The battle was long over, the victory secured, but the watch never ended. Protecting the garrison, protecting Olivia, protecting the life he had painstakingly rebuilt, that was the mission now. And Marcus Cole never abandoned the mission.